In the last video, we made some really good progress on this engine out of my Mark 7 Fiesta. Now, these 1 litre EcoBoost engines are renowned for quite a few things, and not the good kind. One of them in particular is the oil pump down here can clog up. So in the last video, we checked that over, and to my surprise, it actually wasn't too bad. The pickup at the bottom here was looking surprisingly clear, and after a quick clean, it was looking pretty much brand new. Now, although the belt for the oil pump looked pretty good, I decided as a precaution, I'd change that over, especially seeing as I already had all the timing components off. I also cleaned up all the mating surfaces for the timing cover, and also for where the sump mounts onto the bottom of the engine as well. And I gave the outside of the engine a really good clean and a couple of coats of engine paint as well. And doesn't it look good? And as well as all that, I told you in the last video that I had the cylinder head checked out. I'd had it skimmed and pressure tested to make sure that it was ready to go for the rebuild. I also had the top of the engine block tested, and that was good to go as well. So I said that in this video, we'd be starting to put things back together. But I'm afraid I was wrong. The plan was that in this video, we'd fit a new head gasket and reinstall the cylinder head. But that's where our problem lies. The cylinder head. So let's go and take you back up to mine, show you the cylinder head, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so here is the cylinder head, which, like I told you a minute ago, has been skimmed and pressure tested. So fingers crossed this is ready to go. But when I said there was a problem, the problem isn't really something that drastic. It's more just the fact that, well, I mean, look at the state of it. I wanted to get this thing cleaned, so I started looking up how to clean a cylinder head. And down the rabbit hole we went. I started looking up how to remove the valves and other components from the cylinder head, how to clean the valves, even how to lap valves, which I didn't even know was a thing, and now I know what it is. But you're probably thinking, whoa, slow down, you only said you wanted to clean it. Why are you suddenly talking about taking the whole thing apart? Well, I'll explain. Despite the fact that people will tell me, oh, you should have disassembled and rebuilt the head while it was off because it's just easier and you should do it. Yeah, okay, I know, and we're going to, but that's not the main reason. If you look mostly like in here, although yeah, this is on the outside, and this is the main thing I wanted to clean up so that we could paint this so that it looks nice with the rest of the engine, but those little bits you can see there are leftover chunks of the material that was removed when the head was skimmed. Chances are there's going to be little metal shavings and all sorts of bits, and there's obviously loads of dirt and stuff, not just in these bits that I can get to, but also down where all the valves sit. So I thought it probably was best if I just take everything out, give this a proper clean, and then reassemble everything, because as well as knowing then that everything is clean and there is no chunks of metal and stuff like that sitting in here, I'll have learned how to do it. And whoa, hold up, I can already see you guys vigorously typing, oh, while you're in there, you need to do that. Yes, valve stem seals. Don't worry, I'm going to do those while I'm in there as well. So I've gone ahead and picked up a valve spring compressor kit, so I'm going to get the first valve out off camera just to have a go at it and see how I get on, and then I'll bring you in and show you on the next one. Okay, so the first valve is out of the cylinder head, and I've got it laid out on the bench here. I've put it all back together, and I'm going to show you exactly what we've got here and how it all goes together. I've got this laid out on the workbench the way it would sit in the car. So we've got the exhaust at the front, inlet at the back. So these are all the exhaust valves, 6 of those, and then 6 inlet valves across the back. And then just to arrange everything when it comes out, I've used the box that the valve spring compressor kit came in. So I've got exhaust at the front, inlet at the back, same as the way the cylinder head is sat on the bench, and like I said, as it is in the car. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and a few practice holes, but ignore those. So those are for the valves. I'm going to stick the valves in there in the order that they come out of the head, and then for all the little fiddly components like the spring, the tappet, and there's a couple of other little bits in there that I'll show you in a second, I've got these plastic cases, one for the exhaust, one for the inlet, rather than trying to get it all into one case because it just won't quite fit. So that is how I'm going to arrange everything, because you need to make sure that as these come out, they're stored together. Everything that came out of that port stays together, and then when it goes back together, it needs to go back in that port. You don't want to mix and match these. But for now, let's show you what we've actually taken out here. So this is the first bit that you'll see, which is this on the top here, which is a tappet, I believe that's what they're called. So that is the first piece. So that just literally sits on the top. So we're going to pop that in there. This is the rest of the assembly. So you've got a spring on here, you've got the valve, this sort of long stem with this like plunger looking bit on the bottom, that is the valve. So as that moves in and out of the bottom of the cylinder head, it opens and closes that port to allow, in this case, exhaust gases out, or for the inlet valves, it allows air in from the inlet manifold into the combustion chamber. Okay, so let's go through the rest of this valve assembly and what else we've got here. So we've got the valve spring. If I move that down out of the way, what's keeping that on? We've got a spring retainer at the top here. It's kind of like a top hat which sits inside the top of the spring there and just prevents that from sliding off. Now we do need to be able to get this off the valve stem. That's why there is these two little pieces at the top here. These are called collets, or sometimes called keepers. I'll show you those a bit more in a second, but you can just see, hopefully on the top of there, the ridges that those sit in. You can see they've got like little ridges inside them. So basically those little ridges grab on to these in here, and that stops this top hat being able to come off the top. But obviously now we've removed those, that can come off, and then we can remove the spring as well, and we're just left with our valve. Okay, so that's all the components from the first port that we removed, all nicely stored away. We've got the valve in here, and then we've got the spring, the tappet, we've got the retainer, and we've got the two keepers as well in that little box in the right slot so that I know exactly where they've come out of the cylinder head. So that is pretty much everything that is in that port. There is one more thing in there, and that you can see down there is the valve stem oil seal. And like I said, we are going to be replacing these, but I'll get onto those in a little bit. That can sit there for now. So let's crack on. We're going to get the rest of these valves out of here. I'm going to show you how I got those first components out using the valve spring compressor tool. And after I've shown you one, then we'll just whiz through and get the rest of these out, because it's all just going to be pretty much the same. So let's show you how I did one of these, and then we can tackle the next step. Now, because we're going to be using this tool to compress the valve springs, then it is really important that you put on a pair of safety glasses just to protect your eyes in case anything slips or lets go, because if one of those hits you, then you'll know about it. Now, the reason I went for this tool in particular, there's a couple of reasons. There's a couple of different ones you can get. You can get tools that literally just hammer in. It just compresses the spring really quickly and then the keepers pop out, but I'm not really a fan of those. They don't look too good. And then there's like almost like big like a big jaw that you squeeze and it presses all in one action. But when you want to release it, it's going to be quite quick, and if you don't control that and let it go too quickly, then it's going to ping off. This one, because you wind it in and out, although it takes a little bit longer, you've got full control over like how fast or slow it actually compresses and releases those springs. So that's one of the reasons why I went for this, and it was really cheap, so I'll leave a link in the description. With the cylinder head up on some wooden blocks, I'm removing the tappet from the next valve. Then I can slide the tool underneath and position it underneath the valve that I want to remove, and then with the tool in position, I can wind down the top bar until the attachment makes contact with the top of the valve retainer. After a quick check to make sure everything's in position, I continue winding the tool down to compress that valve spring. This gives us access to the keepers, and these gaps in the tool make it really easy to get a pick in there and pry the keepers away from the valve stem. A fine magnet would come in handy here, but it turns out my pick's magnetic. With the keepers removed, I'm simply winding the tool back out, and then I can remove the retainer and the spring and then pop the valve out the bottom. And with the valve out, I can go ahead and pop that along with everything else in my little organizers. And that's it. There really isn't that much to it. So let's crack on and do the others. Okay, so that's all the valves and the rest of the assemblies removed from the cylinder head. Now there's just one thing, well, 12 things left to remove from here before we can clean this, and that is the valve stem oil seals that sit down in there. Well, actually, there's 11 left to remove because I've already gone ahead and popped one out. Get a pair of pliers around there, and it comes out no problem. So I removed the rest of the stem seals, and with the head completely stripped, I took it outside and sprayed it down with degreaser, agitated all the dirt with a brush, and then rinsed it off with a hose. And when I was done, it was looking pretty damn good already. But I decided I could go one better, so I gave the intake and exhaust ports a clean with some choke and carb cleaner, just to try and remove as much of that carbon buildup as I could by hand. And after one last wipe down with some brake cleaner, I was actually really happy with the results for such a quick job. And there we go, the cylinder head is looking pretty clean. It's by no means perfect, but for what I was trying to achieve, I'm really happy with the result. results. Now, if this was a high performance engine or something I was going to keep for a really long time, or was going for an absolutely spotless, perfect build with this, then I would have got this professionally cleaned, got it hot tanked. But like I said, for what I'm trying to achieve, I just wanted to get as much of the sort of large, loose bits of carbon deposits from in here off as I could, which I've managed to do. And more importantly, I've also got the faces of these quite clean, so that hopefully I can get a really good seal when I eventually lap the valves, which we will get onto. But first, I need to clean the valves up. So sorted with the cylinder head for now, so I'm going to move on to the valves while this is having a bit of time to dry, and then once the valves are clean, we can lap them, because we need this. If you don't know what lapping is, we'll go through that in a minute. Okay, so back in the shed, and we're moving on to cleaning the valves. As you can see, I've done these 6 over here, and I've still got these 6 over here left to do. So I'm going to take you through the process of cleaning these up. As you can see, they are clean. They're not shiny or polished or anything like that. We're not going for a 100% perfect job with this. We're going for functional and clean. These are clean and they're smooth to the touch, so they're going to be perfect for what we need. And the seats are looking quite good. So once we've lapped these, I think we're going to get a really good seal. Now, surprisingly to me, the inlet valves are way more carboned up than the exhaust valves. That was surprising at first, but I've done a bit of research as to why that might be. And supposedly it could be because this is a direct injection engine, so fuel is squirted directly into the combustion chamber, and it's not given chance to burn up anything that collects on the intake valves, because the fuel doesn't come in until after the air has bypassed the valves. I think that's why anyway. If anyone has got any better suggestions, then please let me know in the comments. But I'm going to take you through cleaning up this inlet valve and show you how we're going to get it looking less like this and more like this. I started off by scraping off as much of the loose carbon buildup that I could just by hand. You don't really want to use anything like a wire brush on this because you might damage the valve itself. Next, I wrap the valve stem in some electrical tape to protect it because it's going in the chuck of the drill, and I don't want that to damage the valve stem at all. If you do any sort of damage to the valve stem, then the valve stem oil seals are not going to seal properly against it. With the valve held in the chuck of the drill and rotating it at about half speed against a medium scotch pad for about 2 minutes, making sure that I keep the scotch pad moving around the valve at all times and not focusing in just one spot. After a couple of minutes, I'm switching over from the medium green pad to a much finer grey pad for about another minute. And there we go, after about another minute, that is looking really good. So with this intake valve done, it can go back into our organiser and I can crack on with the remaining 5 valves. Okay, so that is all our valves clean. And now it's time to move on to lapping the valves. So lapping the valves is essentially re-grinding the sealing lip on the valve itself with the valve seat inside the cylinder head. You use a grinding paste like this, which has a fine side and a coarse side, and then you use a little tool like this, which is essentially just a stick with a couple of different size plungers on either end. You stick that on the top of the valve and you use that to rotate the valve inside the cylinder head. And like I said, you almost like re-grind the sealing surface between the valve and the seat in the cylinder head. Now, whether you use the coarse or the fine grinding paste really depends on the condition of your valves. Mine were actually quite good after I cleaned them up. There was no obvious pitting or anything like that around the seat, so that's why I'm going straight in with the fine grinding paste. If my valves looked like they were pitted, then I would have started off with the coarse grinding paste and then moved on to the finer later on. So I'm putting a couple of dabs of the fine grinding paste on the lip of the valve and then popping it into its cylinder. Then I'm attaching the appropriate size suction cup on the tool and then rubbing the stick between my hands. Kind of like the way you might see someone trying to start a fire with sticks. I'm only applying very light downward pressure because the weight of the valve should handle this for you, and you just want to rotate it backwards and forwards for a few minutes. Now, the telltales with this process is the noise that it makes when you rotate the valve. So to start with, it's going to sound quite gritty. It's going to make quite a distinct grinding noise. But after you've done this for a few seconds, then you'll notice that the noise changes and it starts to sound a lot smoother. Next, I'm lifting the valve out, spinning it 180 degrees, then popping it back in and repeating the same process. I'm doing this a few times until it sounds smooth pretty much straight away. Next, I'm removing the valve completely and giving it a clean, and I'm also cleaning the valve seat inside the cylinder head. Then I'm applying some fresh grinding paste and repeating the process over again until I'm satisfied that this valve is complete. Okay, so this is one of the valves that I've already lapped. And if you look closely, you can see that kind of dull grey ring around the lip of the valve. So that is the sealing surface. And if you look inside the cylinder head, I've got them next to the cylinders that they actually came out of. You can see, again, we've got that kind of dull grey ring all the way around this port. And we haven't got it on this side because I haven't lapped the valve. that goes in this port yet. So this is that valve, and as you can see on that one, we don't have this dull grey ring around the outside. So lapping valves isn't really too difficult, it's just quite time consuming, it can be quite tedious, and I've still got these 5 to do, but I'm not going to show you all of those in real time. I'm just going to crack on, whiz through them really quickly and try and get this done, because I am aware this video is taking quite a long time, but I just want to get as much information over to you guys as I can, as I learn, as I do this. Like I say, I've never done this before, I'm learning as I go, so you'll just have to bear with me. But I hope you're enjoying it so far, and I'm going to crack on, get the rest of these valves done, and then we can give the cylinder head a final clean, and then we can put it back together. Oh, and I'll leave a link in the description to this little kit that I bought for lapping valves. You get the grinding paste and this little tool as well. Okay, so that's all the valves lapped. There's just one thing left I need to do, and that's to give the cylinder head one more clean. I'm not going to show you that because it's going to be no different to what we did earlier. I just want to get rid of anything that we might have loosened, like there's a bit of carbon falling down the intake ports there, and just to get rid of any remnants of that grinding paste, because we don't want any of that left in here. So I'm going to go get this one last clean off camera. I'm also going to give the valves one last clean with some brake cleaner off camera, and then we're ready to reassemble it. Okay, so everything is clean and dry, and we're ready to reassemble the cylinder head. And the first thing I'm going to be installing is the new valve stem oil seals. I'm applying a little bit of assembly lube to the inside of the seals and then loosely seating them inside the cylinder head. Next, I'm using a 16mm socket on an extension to press the seals down into place. There really is nothing to install in these, so let's get the rest of them in. Then we can flip the cylinder head over and install all of the valves. The stem seals should hold these in place while we flip the cylinder head back over, and then we can reinstall the springs and all the other components. After flipping the cylinder head back over, there really is nothing to it. It is literally just the reverse of the disassembly. I'm applying a little bit of assembly lube to any moving parts and also to any surfaces where the parts make contact with one another. So I'm popping back in the spring and the spring retainer, then using the spring compressor tool to compress the spring, and then I can install the keepers, which is by far the hardest bit of reinstalling all these valve components. I recommend using some sort of non-magnetic tool to just adjust the position of the keepers if you need to, and just to make sure they're fully located. I found that a little bit of assembly lube on the valve stem was just tacky enough to keep the keepers in position while I wound off the spring compressor. It's important that when you release the tension on the valve spring that the keepers stay in place and aren't dislodged by the spring retainer. Taking the time to check this now could save you a lot more in the long run. And speaking of time, I know this video has been quite long, so let's crack on and get the rest of these valve assemblies installed. With all the valve assemblies back in, I'm applying some assembly lube to the inside of the tappets and popping them back on top of the valve stems. Okay, so there we go, that's the cylinder head rebuilt, and I'm so happy with how this has turned out. Like, it was a lot easier than I was expecting it to be, but nevertheless, I still learned a hell of a lot in doing it. Now, I said I was going to paint the outside of this, and I am going to do that, but I'm just going to go ahead and do that off camera because I haven't really got time. It's starting to go dark, and I want to get this video out to you. I was hoping also to get this installed in this video, but again, I've just run out of time to get that done, and I know I'm already a week behind with getting this video out to you guys. But with stuff like this, rather than rushing to get a video out to a time schedule, I'd rather take my time, work through it, because like I say, I'm still learning as well, but I want to give you guys as much information as I could while still keeping the video interesting. And I just think that taking a little bit longer to do it makes me put out a much better quality video, and I hope you guys can appreciate that. So I'm sorry the content's been a bit slower again, but I am 100% committed to the rebuild on this car now because I'm fed up of seeing it sat on my driveway with tarps all over it. I just want to get the engine rebuilt back in so I can actually drive this thing. The next video you're going to see will definitely be me installing the cylinder head and also starting to tackle some of those timing components as well. Now, if you found this video interesting or you've learned something, I'd definitely love to hear about that in the comments below, and if you could give me a thumbs up as well, that would really help me out. And guys, so many of you that watch these videos are still not subscribed to this channel, so again, if you guys could just do that for me. Subscribe, the word doesn't really suit because that suggests that you have to pay for it, but these videos are totally free. Clicking that subscribe button doesn't mean you have to pay for anything, but it really helps me out if you do so, and it helps get these videos out to more people. So please guys, if you can, drop a like, drop a subscribe, It really helped me out. Now, unfortunately for this video, it is time to end, but if you hit that subscribe button, then you can join me next time when we carry on with the rebuild on the 1 litre EcoBoost. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.